Good luck finding another job at your age. That's what Ben said as I handed him my resignation letter. He didn't even look up from his espresso. Just smiled, leaned back, and let it fly across the room like a golf joke at a funeral. I smiled back. Thank you for your wishes. My jaw didn't move, but my fingers pressed the seams of the resignation letter just a bit tighter before I let go. One small crack in the mask. That's all he'd get. Then I turned to leave. That's when he noticed the suitcase. It wasn't fancy, just old military green worn at the seams. He squinted like it offended his sense of minimalism. What's in there? He asked. His desk was glass. No papers, no dust. Just a MacBook, a vase with a single orchid, and a photo of him shaking hands with a startup founder I once had to clean up after. The kind of office where nothing ever happened, but everything was performed. I didn't stop walking. Just something you lost a long time ago. My name is Marshall Vane, 58 years old. I was head of strategic intelligence at Corvenix, the kind of title that sounds impressive until you realize it means cleaning up executive mistakes in silence. I'd served the company for 21 years. I built quiet partnerships with governments no one talks about. I managed crises before they had names. I negotiated deals with men who don't shake hands. They nod once and disappear. But all that was invisible to someone like Ben Landry. Young, VC-backed, obsessed with speed over structure. He called me the legacy asset once in a boardroom, like I was a dusty painting from a war no one remembers. As I reached the 9th floor, a junior associate stepped out of the hallway. She saw me, paused, then buried her face in her phone and turned around. I didn't blame her. So I gave him my resignation, in person, no drama, just a signature on paper, and a suitcase. I didn't take the elevator. Too many eyes. Instead, I walked down the back stairwell, each step echoing like a slow metronome. I passed floor after floor of people I used to protect from themselves. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. The latch clicked twice when I closed it. The left side stuck for half a second. The fabric there had a tear I never fixed. I ran my fingers along the paracord I'd tied years ago as a grip. Habit. My footsteps felt like punctuation marks. Final. Quiet. Precise. By the time I reached the lobby, I'd already forgotten the security guy's name. He used to bring me coffee when I worked late. He barely looked up now. That's fine. I wasn't there to be remembered. I once told Ben in a quarterly review, there's a difference between leading and trending. He laughed, called it boomer wisdom. That line was carved on a plaque in my first unit's mess hall. Out in the parking lot, the sun was cruel. Not hot, just clear enough to make everything look clinical. I unlocked the truck, an old F-150 with a cracked dashboard and a compartment under the seat that held more truth than most press releases. The suitcase clicked shut against the passenger floor mat. I didn't look at it again, just sat there a moment, engine off. Before shifting into drive, I opened the glove compartment. Inside, a folded card laminated in clear plastic. No words, just a red stamp, faded. I touched it once, then closed the box, staring at the glass tower I'd helped build, knowing it would crack from the inside. They always do. There was a sticker on the inside of my windshield, faded, nearly peeled off. A red eagle, holding a spear. Nobody asks about it anymore. That's good. Let them forget. Let Ben think it was just an old man's bag full of regrets. He'd find out soon enough what it actually carried. As I pulled onto the main road, I glanced once in the rear view. Ben was standing by the window, mouth slightly open, one hand on his hip, the other still holding my resignation letter like it was radioactive. He looked smaller now, like the tower behind him didn't want to be seen with him anymore. That suitcase didn't carry anger. It carried proof. And I wasn't done delivering. They say legacies are written in grand gestures. Mine was built in silence, clause by clause, handshake by handshake. 3 months ago, I was in that same office by 6:40 a.m., as always. The building smelled of copy toner and glass cleaner. No one else on the floor yet, I liked it that way. By 7:15, I'd reviewed 3 contract amendments, reworded a supplier clause to protect margin under volatile tariffs, and placed a sticky note, just a dot, on the fourth page of a high-risk acquisition proposal. No need to write anything. The legal team would understand. I taught them that code myself. My name hadn't been on the company's website homepage in 2 years, but if you traced the most stable partnerships we had, I was buried in the carbon copy line of every signature page. Ben had just joined back then, young, fast-talking, fresh off a headline deal in fintech. I didn't like him, but I trained him. In his first month, he nearly blew a retention clause with one of our key logistics providers. I rewrote the memo, had the revised version slipped into the board packet 10 minutes before the vote. Ben never even saw the original go out. He thanked me afterward. "You've got a good grip on the old ways," he said. I just nodded. Later, I realized that wasn't a compliment. We had coffee together once a week back then, his idea. Knowledge transfer, he'd say, always taking notes on his phone. But after a while, he stopped showing up. His calendar was too packed. I started seeing more of his new hires, people with words like brand architecture in their titles, people who talked a lot and listened rarely. They always asked, "What's your vision?" as if a profit margin wasn't vision enough. Then there was Elise, 27, sharp, observant, but nervous. She managed procurement workflows. I spotted a flaw in her API vendor contract, saved us 6 figures. I didn't tell her, just rewrote it, then showed her the correction quietly. No need to embarrass her. After that, she started leaving me reports before I even asked. Always annotated, always neat. I never said thank you out loud. But she knew. Weeks passed. The air in the building shifted. Meetings I used to lead got moved without notice. My calendar began to fill with invites I wasn't meant to see, ones I was quietly uninvited from minutes before they started. Then came the brand reset, new posters, new values, phrases like future forward and cultural alignment. I wasn't in a single campaign photo. One Friday, a junior analyst walked into a quarterly review and said, "Oh, are you still on this team?" I looked up. "Not for long," I said. I wasn't joking, just hadn't decided the terms yet. The following Tuesday, I arrived to find the key code on my office door blinking red. Tried it again. Same response. Elise passed by with 2 coffees and paused. "Try the admin code?" she whispered. I didn't move. The sign on the door now read, Creative Strategy Hub. My nameplate was gone. Inside, through the glass, I saw a long white table, 3 open laptops, and an untouched whiteboard, but no folder. The one I always kept in my desk drawer. Not a thick one, just black with a red wax seal sticker holding it shut. Nothing official, just a habit. I stepped back, walked past the espresso machine Ben had installed for employee morale, past the screen showing our stock ticker, past Elise, down to the basement. I reached into a locked supply cabinet, my backup cabinet. Same black folder, intact. Good. I pulled out a laminated card with a 7-digit number and slid it into my wallet behind my driver's license. Then I climbed back upstairs, nodded at Elise, and walked out. They thought they'd erased me. They hadn't read the fine print. By Thursday, I couldn't even see my own calendar. Meetings disappeared. Clients stopped replying. Ben was forwarding them updates I hadn't written. Elise stopped knocking. She stopped emailing too. When I asked about the last board packet, she said, "Oh, I thought Ben told you." Then smiled. Soft. Practiced. I used to think being invisible was a tactical advantage, not when you're still sitting at the table. My name was gone from the Slack directory. IT said it was a bug. Elise said it was probably a server refresh. Ben just laughed. He had taken my chair at the Friday brief, same seat I used for 8 years. He didn't look at me. He just said, "Let's keep this one tight today." I kept my arms crossed. I didn't speak once. They moved my desk, said it was closer to operations. It was across from the printer. Fluorescent lighting. Cardboard boxes stacked like insulation. I sat in silence for an hour before someone noticed. A junior analyst walked by, stopped, then asked, "Did you, switch departments?" "No," I said. "Oh, Cool. He didn't look back. Ben called me late Friday, his voice casual. Hey man, sorry about the shuffle. You know how Ops likes to play Tetris with floor space. I didn't respond. He added, there's a full board meet on Monday. Should be quick. We'll present the reorg. Elise will handle your deck. I wasn't told about the meeting. Oh, you're not presenting. We're just finalizing structure. You'll be there, though. Of course. We'll loop you in on next steps. I hung up. Then I stared at the printer until it jammed. That night I drove to the storage unit, the one under a fake LLC in Newark. The code still worked. I opened the locker and pulled the backup case from the concrete shelf. It was heavier than I remembered. Still sealed. Black latches. Dual locks. I didn't check what was inside. Didn't need to. It wasn't time yet. Saturday. I returned to the beach house, the one Elise didn't know I still had keys to. No one was there. I walked through the kitchen. The counters had been cleared, but one drawer still had old utility bills tucked behind the dish towels. My name was crossed off. Her handwriting. She'd been filing change of address forms for months. There was a pile of junk mail on the floor near the door. I spotted something odd. A torn envelope from the state retirement board. The seal had been ripped open, but the letter was still there. She'd been requesting early withdrawals under my name. Sunday I shaved. I always shaved before combat briefings, not for protocol, for control. Monday I walked into the building at 7:14 a.m. Same boots, same bag. The suitcase stayed in the truck. Elise was already in. She didn't look surprised, just irritated. Like I was a bad memory walking around unsupervised. She followed me with her eyes but didn't speak. I opened the office fridge, pulled out the glass jar with my initials. It was empty. Someone had cleaned it and left it on the top shelf. No coffee, no lunch, no name. I tossed it in the trash. Then I went to the conference room, and I waited. At 8:02 a.m., Ben walked in, grinning like a weatherman with good news. He pulled out his phone. Let's keep this light. You know how boards get. He didn't know I'd read the full board prep. He didn't know I had the original version of the deck, the one that didn't delete the credit section. He also didn't know the clause on page 47 of the advisory contract, the clause that required unanimous sign-off for any executive title reassignment if the partner had closed deals over $10 million in the prior year. He hadn't gotten my signature, and Monday's board meeting was to announce Elise as Chief Strategy Officer. I didn't say a word in the meeting, not then. But when Ben said, I think we're all aligned, I stood up, walked toward the door. He asked, where are you going? I turned, just getting the suitcase. And for the first time, Elise looked nervous. Marshall walks into the boardroom like a man walking into an old war zone. Silent, precise, no sudden movements. He doesn't sit, doesn't ask for permission, just places a folder on the table, slow and calm. Inside, the original agreement from 3 years ago, signed, dated, witnessed. It includes the specific clause protecting him from role reassignment without a formal review and consensus, a clause Ben either forgot or ignored. One of the board members, a man with more gray hair than expression, reaches for the folder. He scans. Then his eyes rise. Ben shifts in his seat. Marshall doesn't look at him. I'm not here for my job back, Marshall says flatly. I'm here so you know I know. He pushes another page forward, a printed email chain showing how Elise rerouted 3 of his key clients into her own pipeline. Before the reassignment, before the live announcement, the woman with the glasses clears her throat. This wasn't disclosed. Marshall doesn't blink. He just tilts his head slightly, as if surprised they expected honesty from Elise. Another board member speaks up. There was no performance review filed, no complaints either. So what exactly prompted the restructuring? Ben leans forward, trying to regain control. This isn't a trial. It's an evolution. Elise is ushering in a new direction. And rewriting history to fit the script, Marshall says. Got it. He stands, smooth, collected. And just so you're aware, he adds, eyes locked on no one in particular, I've retained my own copies of all these communications. If this company tries to paint me as unstable, I'll respond in kind. No threats, just information. He walks out. He doesn't close the door behind him. Back upstairs, Elise is already in damage control mode. Slack pings. Emails fly. To the board, she explains that Marshall had stopped responding, that multiple outreach attempts had been made, that his absence and combative posture in recent meetings left the team no choice but to restructure. She doesn't mention that those meetings had been quietly moved to a calendar Marshall couldn't access, or that his access to the CRM system had been restricted 2 days prior. Then she plants the seed. Marshall has a storied military history. Sometimes, that kind of background makes transitions harder. But one of the board members, Rebecca Lynn, isn't convinced. That night, she calls an old contact at Stratcom Defense Group. Just one question. Did Marshall Vane ever serve under something called Orion Cell? The voice on the other end pauses. You don't ask about Orion, unless you want someone showing up at your house. Ben releases an internal memo titled, Evolution of Leadership. It's full of words like agility, modern vision, and legacy fatigue. Then the final line, loyalty is not entitlement. Marshall reads it from his truck, parked on the edge of the industrial pier, coffee in hand, engine off. He doesn't react, just lets the screen go black. That night he drives north, not home. Instead, he parks in front of a small, overgrown cabin. The lights are off. He knocks twice. A moment later, the door opens. Captain Rourke, retired, quiet, still built like a wall of brick and cold memory. They don't hug, they just nod. Inside, over coffee, Rourke hands him a small, unmarked box. I figured one day you'd come asking. Inside, old field notebooks, a hard drive, and a mini DV tape labeled 0402, Final Pitch Cut, Auth MV. Marshall turns the tape in his hand. The label has faded, but his initials are still there. Rourke just says, your fingerprints are on that strategy. They've been writing your blueprint since day one. A beat. Rourke looks at him. You going public? Marshall shakes his head. Just clean. Back in the city, Marshall prepares. He prints charts, aligns reports, tags timestamps. He overlays Elise's speech with old footage from 3 years ago. Exact phrases, slide templates, even the timing. It's not inspiration. It's replication. Then he writes one sentence on a blank piece of linen paper. I was never in your way. You just never knew who cleared it. He slides it into an envelope. Writes Elise's name. Then he sends the reports. Not to Ben, not to Elise, but directly to the board's legal counsel. He attaches the tape and a time-stamped file proving authorship of the original pitch. That night, at 11:47 p.m., a notification pops up on Ben's phone. Emergency session requested, 9 a.m. At 11:51, Elise texts Ben, Did you see the envelope on my desk? Ben doesn't reply. He's already pouring a drink and rereading the clause Marshall left behind. The board convened the next morning. No cameras, no live broadcast. Just a quiet executive chamber and the sound of chairs sliding back as Ben took his seat at the head. But the seat had a nameplate. It didn't say his name. A legal associate stepped forward with a folder. No introduction. Just placed it in front of Rebecca Wynn, the chair of the audit committee. Inside, the pitch deck Marshall wrote, with metadata intact, email chains, time-stamped drive logs, and the unedited voice memos Elise had deleted from the cloud, all restored. Alongside them, the short internal video he'd submitted months earlier, the one Elise had called outdated. Except it matched the live stream presentation almost slide by slide. Ben leaned forward, scanning the documents. His face didn't twitch, but his fingers tightened on the table edge. Rebecca cleared her throat. We'd like to know why this wasn't disclosed during the transition phase. Ben stayed still. Then Elise spoke. Too quickly. It's a coincidence. These ideas. were uploaded to the internal archive under your name 2 months later, the associate cut in. The metadata's been verified. Silence again. Another board member, Patel, flipped through the printed slides. Why would you call a man outdated, then repurpose his vision without credit and without due process? No answer. We've received notice from Marshall's legal counsel, the associate continued. He's not seeking litigation. He's offered a resolution, attribution, withdrawal of public claims by Elise, and his formal detachment from company operations moving forward. Ben raised his eyes. He wants back in? No, Rebecca said. He's not asking to return. Ben leaned back. Then what does he want? The associate turned to the final page. Nothing more than clarity. Credit for what he built, and silence about the rest. Across the room, Elise's shoulders dropped. The board voted without further discussion. Elise was asked to step down quietly. Ben would take an indefinite sabbatical, which was just another word for being buried alive in PR statements. Marshall would receive 8% equity in the spin-off venture. No title, no office. But he would choose the team. The public would see it as a handover, a generational transition. The truth would stay buried unless someone pushed further. When the meeting ended, Rebecca found an envelope in her folder, sealed with black wax. Inside was a handwritten letter from Marshall. No signature, just one sentence. I could have burned it all down. That's why I didn't. Back at Elise's townhouse, a courier delivered a small box. It wasn't from the board. It wasn't from PR. She opened it and froze. Inside was a USB stick, black, unmarked, and a note in Marshall's handwriting. In case you forget what you saw in the mirror. She hesitated, plugged it in. It wasn't the pitch deck. It was the raw live stream file. Unedited. From a secondary camera, angled from the office door. You could see her, pausing before going live, rehearsing the line. You were the perfect leader. For another time. Then muttering, barely audible. Let's hope the old man doesn't see this. She pulled the stick out, threw it on the desk, and covered her face. Then she noticed the drawer next to her. She hadn't opened it in weeks. Inside was the original cassette tape. The one from years ago. The one she said she lost. It was never lost. He had put it back. Not to threaten her. To remind her who handed her the mic. She stared at the box, at the note, at the drawer, and she whispered as if he could hear her, "Why didn't you destroy me?" But the answer was already written. He didn't have to. The kettle clicked off just as the sun cracked through the upper slats of the window. Marshall didn't rush. He poured the water slowly over the grounds in the old metal press, the same one he used in the service. Dented, seasoned, reliable. The cabin was quiet. No buzz of notifications, no headlines. Just the creak of wood expanding with heat and the soft hum of the ocean about 30 yards from his front steps. He didn't live in the past, but some things deserved a place on the shelf. Above the small workbench, organized with surgical precision, sat a single framed photo. Not of people, not of a company, just a whiteboard, with a pitch sketched in red marker, dated 3 years back. A timestamp in the corner. His handwriting across the title. Next to it, the suitcase. Closed. Scuffed. Handle worn. Empty now. He didn't keep it to remember what he carried out. He kept it to remember he left nothing behind. The knock came around 9 a.m. Not sharp, not urgent. He opened the door to a young man in a navy polo, maybe mid-20s. Nervous, but polite. "Mr. Vane?" He nodded once. I work with Devon, the new head at Monarch Labs. We're setting up a prototype center up north. She mentioned you helped design the original framework." Marshall didn't answer, just waited. The kid scratched the back of his neck. "I just wanted to say thanks. We found your memos, the ones from 2019. Honestly, they're still ahead of where we are. Still, Marshall didn't speak. He just offered the kid a cup of coffee, poured in silence. They drank. No more words. The young man left a few minutes later, walking off toward a rental car. Marshall didn't watch him go. He just rinsed the mugs and dried them with the old field cloth hanging by the sink. He stepped outside just before noon. The sand was warm, the wind light. He walked without destination, just a stretch of legs and silence. When he reached the tide line, he paused. From his pocket, he pulled out a single black USB stick, unmarked. He stared at it a moment. Not with nostalgia, not with regret, then tossed it gently into the surf. The waves didn't care, and neither did he. That night, he locked the cabin. No alarm, no security system. He just placed the key in the lockbox, turned once, and walked away. Not because he was leaving, but because nothing needed guarding anymore. Not the past, not the truth, not even his name. A single note remained on the table inside, written in his own hand. No signature, just a sentence. They took the mic. I kept the voice. The gentleman's revenge isn't loud, but it's always personal. If this felt personal, make it personal. Subscribe now, and don't miss tomorrow's story.